get started. Dr. Baker will be here in about 10 minutes, but we want to honor everybody's time. So I will call this academic achievement meeting to order. Today is Wednesday, December 7th, 2022. And do we have any public comment? Did you fill out a form? Are there? Yeah, you have to fill out you can go fill one out.
Yeah, this is our last meeting of the year.
Yeah.
Wow.
The school year is going by quickly. DeAndre, right?
Yep.
Okay. And you know the 3 minutes?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm used to 3 minutes speaking.
Yes.
How you doing, everybody? My name is DeAndre Jones, known as D Jones. I'm here to speak about, just give some feedback and just things I've been doing in the community. Obviously, you guys know when about Adelante High School or somehow get the Adelante High School off Grand Rapids Public Schools' hands. Yesterday, I attended a board meeting or a party with Ferris State with the board down there. So I got to chill with the president. I used to go to Ferris State. I talked to the Ferris Foundation executive director. I talked to some guys in IT. I talked to the guys who are actually building the esports stadium there at Ferris. They're doing a lot of cool things, and they've actually created a degree at Ferris. So as I talked to the school district about just college and career opportunities and just being able to advance and get esports here in our community, I'm really starting to see the benefit of it as I'm starting to go to these different events and starting to network with people and out in the community. I really care about the education of the next generation of our students. Just from the curriculum to the opportunities to the education to every facet of life that these kids will grow up, because the world is a cruel and harsh place, and if we don't teach these kids how to survive, then I don't know how they'll make it in college and how they'll be able to learn the life skills and things that they need to learn to become productive citizens and citizens that can survive with the times. And so I'm very passionate about the community. I'm very passionate about the youth, very passionate about education. I'm still educating myself. I just received a certification from the University of South Florida for ethical and inclusive leadership. So still educating myself, still pushing myself. I actually received 2 certifications, but I'm still pushing myself as I'm talking about education. I really care about creating these opportunities. So I would like esports to be a part of our school district, whether we build esports clubs and eventually teams for our high schools, and if there's any opportunities for education. But I would just continuously come to these meetings, continuously speak about esports, and just advancing our youth, advancing the educational opportunities, because I want to be able to push this from the second worst city for economic development, and I believe part of that is education. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Lovelady Mitchell, would you like to?
Happy holidays and good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to get in front of you. And I want to forecast that the agenda is certainly in front of you. And before I get into that a little bit and invite some folks up, the data points that the topics are rooted in for tonight are our student management system, Synergy. You'll hear some research from or related to the Danielson evaluation system, and lastly, the Michigan school data. Those are some of the data points or research that you'll be hearing about as it pertains to our topics. So the topics are instructional council update by Ms. Pony, so she'll come up shortly. The ESSER update, which is a standing topic for us, in addition to the strategic plan update. And under, or related to our strategic plan, you'll hear about the enrollment update for the school year, the evaluation system, and then lastly, our school index update before I get off into forecasting for the 2023 school year. So with that being said, what I would love to do is call Ms. Pony up to the table.
Hi.
That's okay. It'll be all right. Good evening. As mentioned, I'm Amy Powney, Curriculum Coordinator for Mathematics, and a co-chair of Instructional Council this year. So I'll be giving you the update for our last meeting. We had a virtual meeting on November 17th. As you might recall, that was the afternoon before our snow day.
Okay.
So in order to keep our teachers and staff safe, we chose to meet virtually rather than in person. And during that meeting, Miss Maggie Malone, our Director of Fine Arts, and Mr. Joseph Martin, an art teacher at Alger Middle School, brought forth a proposal for a course for advanced art that he would be teaching in the fall of 2023 to eighth grade students with at least 2 years of experience in art and a C+ or higher, or also any students that receive a 3 or a 4 on the Michigan Visual Arts Assessment. Would also be eligible to take the course. Mr. Martin had previously taught at Ottawa Hills High School as an art teacher, and he saw a need there, that we needed a feeder program for students with a high interest in art who wanted to be able to be eligible to take honors and AP art classes as they progress through their high school years. And so he was interested in proposing this class and having that available for students. It would also fulfill the Art Foundation's credit requirement that many students take in high school as a prerequisite to any other advanced art classes. So they would also be going to school, to high school with high school credit from taking that class as well. The course includes units on the foundations of two-dimensional and three-dimensional art. It was very interesting to hear how he was going to incorporate a unit connecting a social justice issue that's relevant to students with an art project and art history. And then also a unit that allows them to connect art to a personal experience of their own lives. And one of the culminating unit would be to do a project of their choice. And throughout the course, they will create a portfolio, much as advanced art students and professionals do, create a portfolio of work. As well as offering this at Alger, they did share with us, because the council did ask, that the content, knowledge, and materials needed to run this class at any middle school, we have the staff with the capability. Ms. Malone assured us that any school could run this if students desired this. So it can be something that can run in any of our middle schools if there's a desire for students and an interest by students to do that. So it's going to run at Alger, but it's not limited to Alger. So that was shared by Ms. Malone and Mr. Martin. And then the only other thing that we talked about is that I actually brought forth some information about an opportunity that we have for introducing a virtual reality platform, the PRISMS program, which is a spatial learning platform for math and science that actually incorporates learning through movement, discovery, and purpose. It's a really exciting program that exists. Each of this program contains modules, math modules, and then in the fall of 2023, they're introducing some science modules in biology, chemistry, and physics as well. But they cover everything, all of the topics of middle school math all the way through Algebra 2 at this point, and there are plans in the future to go into advanced calculus, AP calculus, and higher. So it's a really exciting program. Within it, students, basically everything is set in a very relevant real-world context problem, big problems, global problems. And as they learn about and learn the context and experience the setting in the 3D environment, they then visualize what's happening mathematically through 3D models, and they manipulate within that environment, manipulate the models, and move from the concrete models into the symbolic representation of the mathematics. And this is a supplemental program. So there are about 5 modules on the major topics of all the different math courses that on sort of the biggest, most relevant topics like linear functions when you're talking about algebra, right? Distance formula and geometry, some of the big things in those courses. So it would be supplemented within our curriculum where it fits and aligns into those topics as a great way to bring to life the use of and the way to see the real world relevance of mathematics, as well as what we know about the research about the way students learn experientially, and the ability to then, like the physical movement and muscle memory that goes along with being able to connect that learning, so that spatial learning memory that they'd get with it as well. It's a really exciting program.
So what sort of platform do they use?
So Prisms is a program that has a platform, but all of the content is actually loaded onto the headsets themselves.
Okay.
Like they come
So it's on
preloaded.
like virtual reality.
Yeah, and
headsets.
so they can update. You do connect to the Wi-Fi only because the teacher has a dashboard that can watch what students are doing, but they don't have the ability to bring anything from the internet onto the devices. Those are locked, and like I said, all of the content is already on the devices. But in order to do updates through the charging stations that they are connected to in the evenings, and in order for the teacher to be able to monitor what students are doing, and the teacher can see in real time, like what a student might be struggling with, where they are in the module, because it's basically 2 days. Each topic is 2 days of VR where you have about 25 to 30 minutes of VR content, so there's time for a teacher to facilitate a discussion, set it up, have the experience, do a follow-up discussion. So each module has 2 parts, so it's 2 days VR and then 1 day finishing up lab on more of the traditional paper pencil, working through things. So yeah, it's pretty exciting, and so they are going to be. We're hopeful that you will probably see a proposal for this coming across your desks soon, because we're interested in piloting it in some of our high schools to begin second semester. And then if all is successful, we really anticipate that this could be something that all of our middle and high schools could experience in the fall. And I'll bring an update. And I was really hoping, and I will try to in December for our December meeting, but I have a demo headset that you can experience it. And so I've had lots of people, I've been to schools with teachers and having them try it and see what it's about and some of the principles, and got them pretty excited about it. So I was hoping to bring that with me to the meeting, but since we went virtual, we couldn't do that, but in the future. So
Very interesting.
yeah. So that is my update. We had no other old business, so we adjourned. What questions might you have for me?
Just with the advanced art, that is something that's gonna, and is it being paid for with ESSER, and will it then continue? So once the money ends,
There is no additional funding for that. So all the materials, as Ms. Malone explained to us, all the materials and that are needed for that are already part of things that we have in our art department. So there wasn't anything additional that was needed that had to be funded differently. It's just the opportunity to have an advanced course.
The other thing is if they get high school credit and art is an elective, they have the opportunity to, they've not qualified, but they got the art elective. Will they be able to continue with another elective? So in other words, I met my art elective, but I really want to continue. I just don't want to give up my electives.
Yeah.
Some students might think that. Is that an opportunity that the student is going to have to continue?
So when they go into high school?
Right.
Yeah, it does open up their schedule.
Okay.
Right? Because it's already fulfilling something prior to even getting to high school.
So
It's
they
going
may
to
have a
open up
choice
their,
of
yeah.
expanding
Yeah.
their horizons or whatever. Okay. Oh, wow, that's cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Have a good holiday.
Yeah, you as well.
So speaking of ESSER, I have an ESSER update that actually crossed your desk. I think last time the general board met and voted. So one of the things that has happened in terms of activity was approving the Imagine Learning language literacy platform, which was brought into the district specifically to support EL classrooms in some of our quadrants. Additionally, internally, there has been some tightening or deepening related to naming an internal person to help manage some of the ESSER dollars or ESSER funds. That's my update on the ESSER. Questions, concerns? No? Okay, so we'll go to the next topic. And you've heard us say, if it doesn't align, it's not time. That is our motto and how we operationalize the strategic plan. And in order to unpack that today, I alluded to data being rooted in our student management system. So the first topic that you'll hear about related to our strategic plan is the 2022-2023 enrollment update. So I'm going to ask Mr. Atkins to come up. And then after that, you'll hear from Mr. Harmsen related to the evaluation review and update, and that's the Danielson research that I referenced. So those two will come up one at a time.
Second, sitting on the floor. Good evening, Ms. Davis, Dr. Baker, and Reverend Matias. For this portion, I'm Mel Atkins, Executive Director of Community Student Affairs. I'm going to give a brief update on our enrollment numbers that we have in the fall. And so looking at this, we had our numbers certified on November 16th. And what it's showing you is we projected a number at 13,717, and really FTE. And FTE, if you think of who has a full schedule. And so you have head count at FTE, but to keep it simple, this who has a full schedule. Some people could be dual enrollment, it could be working with KCTC, it could be many reasons why someone doesn't have a full schedule. But we projected at 13,717. I'm pleased to say we came in just above that number at 13,720. You see the FTE, so we just above 3 FTE above our projections. And so
the third of the student, is that?
really three
point
really students above projections. So that was really an excellent job, really with projections. But I at least want to give a shout out to is some of the schools that beat their projected numbers. And you see them at the bottom: Buchanan, C.A. Frost Elementary, Campus, Chavez, Congress, East Leonard, Kent Hills, Mullick, Palmer, Sibley. At the middle school level, you got Alger, Burton Middle, Museum Middle, Riverside, Westwood, and at the high school, Museum, UPrep, Southwest Middle High, Union Transition, Newcomers, and Southeast Career Pathways are some of the schools that were able to beat their projections. Then when looking at our trend, and we've seen a lot of this information through the facilities master plan work and this data. But just to reiterate again, I know we've been seeing a reduction, as you see in the fall of 2018. We just had just over 16,161 FTE, and we're down to 13,720. There's been some programming changing, like share time and things of that nature, but you see there has been a steadily decline in that. Some things that we've been doing on our end to try to mitigate this decline is just about a year and a half ago, I know we hired an enrollment consultant by the name of Brian Eschbacher. And Brian Eschbacher was from Denver. He was really from Denver Public Schools, and he's one of the gurus out there around kind of what to do. And so we talked around really 10 recommendations that he had under 4 bucket areas after you kind of help audit kind of what we do. And the bucket areas included, it was really 4 bucket areas around 10 areas. But the 4 bucket areas include was ensure the district is ready to support equitable enrollment, make enrollment accessible and easy, and open up more schools to all students, and understand the impact and relationships between enrollment and other equity-driven strategies. And there's 10 things a total under each one of them, and we're doing some of them. Like, do we evaluate the impact of entrance criteria for theme schools, for example? That could be one. Why do we have to be at grade level for X, or and we're asking these type of questions to figure out, is it our procedures or policies, for example, that are impacting some reason why someone may have access to a program and doesn't have access, for example. And the other things that we're doing too is we also partner with SchoolMint. And SchoolMint, they did they're on the marketing side of things. And so they helped us with some of the marketing reports. It was like secret shoppers that they did around, I'm trying to enroll my student, and seeing the ease of what are some potential pluses we do well, some barriers. And it started with social media. They pinged us on Facebook. How long did it take you to respond? What did we do with this? Setting up a tour. Was the tour easy? Was it accessible? What did it look like at the district level? So we learned a lot of things from kind of the secret shopper model as well. And then what I will highlight in just a second, we have our annual GRPS Expos. We had one in November at Union High School. We're going to have another one coming up at Ottawa Hills High School in January. And so it's touting, we went from a theme school expo to a GRPS expo that highlights all our schools. And I think that's really a positive change that we've made. We also implemented door knockers. And door knockers that happens, we sometimes use our own staff, or in the past we've hired additional staff to knock on doors. They're reminding people that school starts. And it's important that they're from the community, and then this is what they do, and remove any barriers that they may have around enrolling, or used to be uniforms or things of that nature, that we try to get the word out when school starts. And then we also had enrollment days in the community in August. And so we know sometimes it's a barrier getting to the school without say, a yellow bus or transportation to get there. So we partner with some community organizations to say you can enroll at these locations across the city as well, that they're trying to mitigate these numbers that you see right here.
So a couple questions before you move on.
Okay.
One is, it looks like it's interesting that the flat year was between fall 20 and fall 21, and it's the other years that we had a thing, and I would have, especially that being during the height of COVID. So a couple questions, but one is that I have read just in national news media that public school enrollment has been down across the country. And is there a way to analyze to what extent we're impacted by that, or is this, and if we should do something as a board to adjust what the work would look like for how to get students back to, in other words, we're not just fighting a historical trend, but a new trend of persons wanting to find other options to being in person at a public school.
Yeah, I would agree with your statement. I know we've been working with Plant Moran, and they've been, what they've been able to do is kind of bring that national lens to us, and birth rates are down, for example. Also, we know that there's a lot of choices, in the sense that some of it is charter, some of it, is other school districts. And we know the economy plays a role in this, and then if people are staying in the state of Michigan or not, all those factors, and probably a few other ones are playing a role in this. But you asked a very good question of like, what can we do as a board to help support this? I would like to kind of probably take that back to the team and try to wrestle with that question a little bit.
Because it may not be just a recruitment issue. It may be that we need to restructure things or consider what's going on. Where are these students?
And part of this too, I think, is going to come out through the facilities master plan. I know there was the 7 recommendations that were approved at Monday's board meeting, and that's going to, because the reality is we do have less students, and so we're trying to provide, I think, a superior service, but we do have less students, but we want to hopefully stop this slide, at this time. And so that's something that we were wrestling with that question, though.
Are we tracking any data at with these different initiatives, like the door knockers and the GRPS expos, are we able to see if those are helping? Like, have we recruited people that weren't planning on enrolling in GRPS because of those?
We do. So when we hired the door knockers, for example, we got daily reports that showed you, we can quantify of how many people either didn't enroll, was going to enroll, or new enrollees. So we had that information. The GRPS Expo, we didn't know because that's really, they're looking for the following year. So November, we will find out in August, if it really happened, but we have the information. So that just takes a little bit longer to track.
Was there anything at the expo, or will there be at this upcoming one that tracks if they are already GRPS families, or if
We do have sign-in sheets and things of that nature. And a lot of families we do is current families that are either looking for, sometimes it's 3-4 years out, and they're looking really early, or they need something for, like our transition years are big, like 5th to 6th grade, for example, or 8th to 9th grade is another a good example when families are looking to see what options are out there. But so it ranges from, they currently have another sibling in GRPS. Sometimes they were young as 2 years old. I have someone, but I'm trying to figure out what we're going to do when we know for preschool or kindergarten. So it ranges.
yeah. And I'm just interested to see how many people that attend those don't have any kids in GRPS, and they're actually looking at it as an option,
Yeah.
a new option
I
for their family.
know, I don't have that number in front of me, but I know there was around 600 600 people that showed up that were interested in our programs at the November Expo. But I would have to break that down a little bit further to see what we can do.
Just wondering if that's data that we have out there.
Yeah, just a couple other things. Yeah, with some of the door knocking or some of the things that you're alluding to in terms of 600 families that have shown an interest that may not be at GRPS yet, just trying to really be proactive in, asking questions. So families that did not come back, why didn't they come back? And I think you can quantify, they didn't come back because, let's say mask mandates, or they didn't come back because the social emotional issues, or they didn't come back because of safety issues. I think that, at least for me, I'm not hearing data like that. And I would like to see that, because that, to me, helps us to figure out how do we, and as a board too, what do we have to change or aid in changing to address some of those pieces, to either bring them back or to shore what we do have, because we might be in danger of continuing to lose because of not responding to issues within our schools, and therefore they're frustrated and I'm out of here. So, and not that we're afraid to look at that, but bringing those things as opportunities to problem solve, not to heighten our problems, but to really say, how do we problem solve, solution focused?
Really good point. And so what you're speaking into is exit surveys is part of it. And that's something I know that we have to get better at. We do it, but not to the ability of really that we need to. And so I know that's on our radar already, but we will continue to try to put systems in place so we have that, so we can really analyze that information. But I know it's going to take a little bit more effort and time to get that underway.
I love what he's saying. I also want to highlight and or unpack something that he alluded to earlier, because the FMP process has illuminated some things for us. One in particular is, how do we get more deliberate in interacting with folks who are not in our school yet? So you all talked about a certain age bracket and or younger families. How do we engage them to better understand what they're shopping for related to public schools? The other data point that we've talked about is, as we look at the quadrants and we look at who's here and who's eligible to attend our schools, who's electing not to attend, and in particular the ones that are choosing public schools, how might we engage them to better understand why they left, to your point, and or why they are still where they are versus with us. So the FMP process has illuminated some of those things, and we have talked about how we get more deliberate in capturing that voice, honoring and listening to the folks who are with us for sure, but also casting the net wider. So we're reclaiming some of the other students, which is a big part of some of the academic forecasting that we hope to do for phase 2 of the FMP process.
I mean, I know just in the neighborhood that I live in, Easttown, I'm seeing a lot of young families. I mean, we're talking 1, 2, 3-year-olds that they're forecasting. They're saying, how is this going to look for my child? And I think we have some entry opportunities in after school or daycare type things, but then when it comes then to starting school, looking at either other places or other kinds of things that are happening. So, yeah, I mean, if we could be more proactive in those things, I think that, it's opportunity to problem solve, to really focus on some solutions. So,
And the last thing what I alluded to, let me get this, is ways to support is really promoting our GRPS Winter Expo. And it's going to be, I'm proud to announce, it's going to be Thursday, January 26th at Ottawa Hills High School. It's, I believe it's 4:30 to 6. But that we will have email blasts, kind of the whole bit of social media, the backpacks, everything that's going to go out in the community. You're going to see a lot of information coming up once the new year starts around this expo. And so this is another chance for our either current or prospective families that are possibly interested in GRPS either next year or future years to learn. We'll have prizes, games. We have principals there and their teams to answer any questions that you have, or the public has. And so it's a fun, free food that always helps to support too. But Thursday, January 26th at Ottawa Hills High School.
Any more questions on this topic?
I mean, just again, we've had a lot of wins. I mean, Union's ROTC came in second in the state. Sport-wise, we've had some major development in the quality of our sportsmanship among our students, and also recruitment to higher ed. So, I mean, those are all things to me that, for me as a parent, I want to see, because I'd like my kids to be in sports or those kinds of options, or even some of the things that we have in regards to science and STEM, competition-wise that they're doing, the debate. I mean, just all those things that we are doing some of those things and well, and we're having successes, and
Yes.
it's too isolated. I'm not seeing enough of the celebrations of that. It's just too focused to just the school hears about it. I'd like to see Union's ROTC here in our next board meeting celebrating with us their win, because that's a win for our whole district too. So things like that I think are really critical.
Okay.
Let's continue to amplify our story. Thank you, Mr. Atkins.
Thank you.
So Mr. Harmson is going to come up next, and Ms. Lusk is also here just for backup or support if needed. And then after that, we'll ask Mr. Atkins to come back up and talk about the school index. I'll prelude this a little bit. Please feel free to have a seat. When we get into the school index, we've really been trying to talk about this as all 50 programs or whole district, not just the ones that are partnering specifically with MDE. So Eric Hermsen will take over, and then you'll hear from Mr. Atkins and team again.
Good evening, Reverend Matias, Ms. Davis, and Dr. Baker. I'm here again to talk about evaluation. I kind of looked back, and the last time I presented on evaluation was 2019, and boy, has a lot happened since then, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But before I moved on with evaluation, I was at one of Amy Powney's demos for the Prisms, and was volunteered to, first time I've ever done virtual reality. And it was just, it like opened up a whole world And I thought the possibility and the power of this were just so cool. So it was last week and it was cold, so I picked the experience. I was going to Miami, and it talked about global warming and then connected that to math. But part of the experience was going to Miami, and I've never been to Miami till I went virtually. And the brain research is so is around when we can link learning to an experience, how that really improves. And there were so many possibilities. We sat there and brainstormed all the ways we could use it. So that was a really cool activity and experience for me. And thank you for Amy and the folks who did that work to bring that to us. So I'm going to talk about evaluation review. I'm not going to read all these, but the purpose of our system is optimize student learning and growth. So we put a lot of resources and time and effort, teachers do, administrators do, and really where it has the greatest power is that it can improve practice, and that will lead to improved student learning. The last one is inform the employment process. We make very few decisions based on evaluation around the employment process. Some of the things that we do use it for is around mentors. So we have a mentor criteria. We use that for. We also use it to for summer school teachers to assign summer school as a criteria. We use evaluation, so it helps us make decisions around there. Go to the next. So a little bit of a historical perspective about evaluation and GRPS. So in 2011 was when the change was implemented around the state law. It became a prohibited subject of bargaining. Student growth was required, and then 4 state-approved tools. For GRPS, we had an evaluation committee, and we collaborated with Cambridge Education, Inc. and Basis Policy Research. Cambridge Education had worked in our district for other reasons and was an expert in what we were doing around teaching and learning, and is just an expert in teaching and learning. And Basis Policy Research is out of Grand Rapids, and they're one of the leading experts in the nation around teacher evaluation and especially student growth. And we designed a model that had multiple measures and were valid and reliable. In 2014, the state passed another law and said that disciplinary records, significant accomplishment, relevant special training, and teachers' attendance had to be part of the final evaluation. So we implemented that. Ongoing feedback from various stakeholders. So throughout all the years we've had it, we've made it really one of them really important that we get feedback from various stakeholders, because the teachers and the administrators and evaluators are the ones who are experiencing this. It's really important to get their feedback on how they're experiencing it, get their voice in helping design and make changes. And focus groups, Steve Petros, who's here, who's our student growth expert, we went to a central office certification program through MASA, and our action research project was to go out and do focus groups in the district with teachers, with evaluators, with union leadership to get feedback from it. And I can remember, still see the conversation Steve and I had around, we have to talk to the folks in the district who are going to tell us how it is. So folks we had good relationships with and people we just knew who had who are going to tell us and be open and honest with the feedback so that we can make the necessary changes that we needed to. We did listening tours with bigger groups. We have teachers from various role groups that we've gotten stakeholder feedback and improved the process, and of course principals and other evaluators. Here are the performance measures that we use for GRPS. So that student growth is at 40%. We've had previous conversations. We've lobbied that 40% is, we think is too large. At one point it was 25% and then went to 40%. There's always been talk it was going to go back to 25%. I've been told by legislators that it's going to go back to 25%. It just never happened. So student growth is 40%. Our observation is 45%. Professional development, educator attendance, and professional responsibilities are the other performance measures we're using currently.
you remember what the ballpark was when it was only 25%, how those others, how the others lined up with percentages? Was like professional development, attendance?
So those have been pretty consistently
once you-
5%. Most of that was in the observation rating. So
The
that-
extra was in.
Yeah.
Okay.
How are they evaluated on attendance?
And I have another slide with
Oh,
that, but I'll go to that. Any other questions on those? All right. Also in 18, when they went from 25 to 40%, they also half has to be state assessment for grades with data. So that starts in 4th grade. Though 3rd grade has data, there's nothing to compare it to measure growth. So 4th grade is when we start using state assessments per the law. In evaluation, we use MSTEP, MyAccess, we use SAT. We also use NWA map growth, so the other half is the NWA map growth. One of the things that some of the feedback that we got is around we really want to have student growth that measures our scholars, and we volunteered to be a pilot, to help pilot and help create Michigan Arts Education Instruction Assessment. So some of our teachers actually helped design those and then pilot those the first year, and how do you measure student growth using it, and then based on their feedback, we implemented all our visual arts and music teachers. We actually have that student growth. I don't know if anybody else in the state uses it, but we do. And there's 17 differentiated student growth role groups. So again, one of the things that is unique to our system is that we want to get it as close as possible to the teacher's practice. So we have 17 different student growth role groups rather than just 1 or 2 or 3. Ms. Davis, your question. So the observations, the average of observation scores, and that's 45%. Professional responsibilities at the end of the year. The evaluator rates the 6 components in the software, and the software calculates scores and assigns a rating. So one of the things that we implemented as a district to provide consistency across the district was that we only have our evaluators rate the components, not the domains, or an overall score for observations and for professional responsibilities. Because what we were finding when we first implemented was that a teacher at school A would be rated in 4 or 5 components as highly effective, and then all the rest ineffective, and that evaluator may have rated that as an effective rating, but the exact same rating at another school, component ratings would be ineffective. So we wanted to make sure that there was consistency. So if I'm rated as a teacher highly effective in 4 components and effective in the other 8 components, I'll be highly effective to provide consistency across. And it also really helps our evaluators just focus on rating the components, what's in there, and giving feedback based on those components rather than...
So based on your example, what was the difference between those 2 evaluators? That reached a highly effective and then that reached either ineffective or...
So it would just be at a different building in their again, this was several years ago, their mindset of what an effective lesson is could be different, or a highly effective lesson could be. So in one evaluator's mind, it's I have 4 highly effectives and 8 effectives. In my mind, that lesson is effective, whereas the other one in their mind, it was highly effective, even though we did a lot of training around that, what that looked like. But
So were you able to go back to those evaluators and, I guess, retrain or correct, or however
we
you call it, or
we
what?
didn't do that for very long. So the solution was to do the calculation rather than to retrain, because we did retrain. So the other thing that was going on at the beginning is that when you're new to something, you don't do it as well as when you're have done it for a while. So all new evaluators, and all evaluators went through 2 full days of training on how to do evaluations and how to rate, and then every year went through a calibration certification training with an outside entity to make sure that we had consistency. So those are some of the ways that we really ensured that we were more consistent in our component ratings and overall ratings. And we continue to have certification calibration trainings for evaluators. That answer your question?
I don't know.
It seems like
I
you've
mean-
done a lot to get it as consistent as possible, but we just went through an evaluation on Monday, and, I mean, there's gonna be some subjectivity. So,
So we've put a lot of time and effort into training our evaluators, and we continue to look at it to make sure that we continue to get better at it and provide accurate ratings. But that's the other strength of our evaluation system is we have multiple measures. So so that provides more consistency around what teachers' actual performance is based on multiple measures rather than based on just 2 measures. So there's many ways that we try to provide consistency across. So the attendance percentage of days work, highly effective is 95%. That's 9 days. Effective is 90% is 18 days. So the 18 days, I believe, are the full amount of sick days and personal business days a teacher has every year. So they can use all of those and still be effective, highly effective. And in reality, almost all, our teachers are so awesome about showing up. Most of them are highly effective. The rest, few are effective. We have, I can't even say a handful who'd be less than effective on attendance. And then, of course, with COVID and quarantine and all those things, we didn't take those into, we
That
didn't
was my
use those.
question.
Yeah.
Like, what if somebody's on maternity leave?
So yeah, that doesn't count too. FMLA doesn't leave.
Okay.
Long-term leaves. Obviously, when I was quarantined, I think maybe all of us were quarantined, but we did not count those against a teacher. And that's, I think, one of the things that we really work hard. And we talked to the union president, and then talked to Mary, and now I talked to Matt. Is really what is fair, right? What is a fair measure, and then also to try to make it to again make sure that we have that voice in when we're making decisions. Professional development, highly effective is 36 hours. Effective is 30 hours. That's required. Almost all our teachers are always highly effective. They do way more than 30 hours. So, and we provide them with lots of opportunities. Including now we have a lot of on-demand and virtual, and so there's a lot more flexibility. We provide professional development on record flex days, so I can get my above and beyond hours during that, or I can do it at the convenience of at my home doing a virtual professional development. So really giving a lot of opportunities for folks to get highly effective in that one. Observations, so our number of observations are differentiated. I talked about that rates the 16 components, domain 1, 2, and 3. And I'll go into what those domains are and a little bit more about the structure. And again, I talked about how the evaluation software calculates to provide consistency, average of observation scores. Other than the teachers knew the profession, so this was another change we made based on stakeholder feedback. Observation 1 for brand new teachers, so that's brand new, the profession is only 10%. Because what we're finding is when you're brand new at it, you're not going to, I remember as a teacher when I was brand new at teaching, my growth from that first month to the third month was just exponential. So what we're finding is that we want to give the feedback and get that observation in right away for those new teachers to help them improve their practice, but often that first score was so low. So we changed that to 10%, 40%, and 50%. We found that that really improved the outcomes for those new teachers knew the profession. They often, by their second one, they were in the effective range. So the number of observations, So there is a 3-year highly effective group. Those are folks who have been highly effective for 3 consecutive years. The following, after 3 highly effective, they don't have to be evaluated. So they're not evaluated. We choose that as a district. We don't have to do that, but we chose that as a district to do that. Our thinking behind that is, in the thinking about all this numbers of observations, is that one of the most important resources for principals, for evaluators, is time. So how do we design a system and the number of observations where evaluators can really focus on those who need the most support? And one of that supports is providing additional observations and feedback. So those are new to the profession, and then some teachers on IDPs. So 3 are highly effective. They're not evaluated. They're not observed that year. The following year, they are. The law states it has to be every other year. If they're highly effective the next year, then the following year, they're not observed again. Tenured and probationary teachers in year 3, 4, and 5, we're finding that by their 3rd year, that's when their practice is often where it's going to be for the rest of their for most of their career on average. So there's only 1 observation, with a caveat that if you're less than effective in a previous year, then you need additional support. We want to make sure that you continue to be effective, so we provide additional observations. It's also part of the law. Teachers new to the profession, again, they need 3 because they're new. They need more feedback. And tenured teachers less than effective the previous year have up to 4 observations. The other thing is that if I have my first observation and it's less than effective, then we, again, to support that teacher, we provide additional opportunities for observations and feedback. Any questions on that? So here's, I often get questions about Danielson evaluation. Was it meant to be used for evaluation? In 99-2000, GRPS, that's when they adopted the first version of the Danielson framework. So if you look back in 1999, you'll see teachers with evaluation based on the Danielson rubric, and that's version 1. In 13-14, we expanded and used a psychologist, instructional specialist, therapeutic specialist. There's also a nurse rubric, early childhood. So we expanded the use, again, to make sure it's measuring what that teacher is doing or other staff member. 2014-15, we adopted the second version of the Danielson framework for teaching. So that's actually the one that was developed in 2007. That was the second version. 2014-15, we started organizing all of our new teacher professional learnings around the components of the Danielson. We also have mentor academies where we train our teachers who are mentors. Was all aligned to components of the Danielson rubric. 2021, when we were teaching virtually, we used a remote version of the Danielson rubric, and we trained all 1,000 teachers and all the evaluators on that rubric and what good remote learning looked like. And we did teachers and evaluators together in the same sessions. We also did an additional one for our evaluators, but we got a lot of really positive feedback on training teachers and administrators together. And then 2020-21, we implemented educational impact on demand Danielson videos and courses. So I can go on Ed Impact and look at component 2A, and I can see a video of best practice. I can also, again, if I want to get above and beyond credit, I can do a whole course that includes video snippets and then some guiding questions, self-guided questions to get above and beyond credit directly related to the Danielson component. The Danielson evaluation tool is one of the 4 state approved. Again, we're currently using the second version. The third version was just published in 2022. And again, it's recommended by Cambridge Education, Basis, Policy Research, experts in teaching, learning, evaluation, and observation. So it's a very highly respected evaluation tool of what good teaching looks like. In 2019, we had Basis Policy Research come in and analyze the 4 state-approved observation rubrics, and of the 4, they said it's considerable research supports the use and it's reliable and valid. And then Danielson does endorse it for evaluation. She calls it the definition of good teaching. She says one of the purposes of the framework is for teacher evaluation, and I actually reached out to the Danielson Group for confirmation, and I also know that, she partners with evaluation software like what we use, so it's apparent that she does feel like it can be used for evaluation as a tool. One of the things that we did also check when we did that research around it and through the basis policy research they did is what are best practices, and we do many of those pre and post observations, scheduled and unscheduled, differentiated the process, and then making sure all observers are trained and calibrated. There's 4 domains: planning, preparation, classroom environment, instruction. Those are the 3 that are always evaluated for an observation, and the 4th are professional responsibilities. That's at the end of the year only. There's 22 components, the 4 domains, and 76 elements that include. The components are high level enough where you should see that in every observation. The elements are, get into more the minute and more detail, and not all elements need to be in every observation. So we don't rate all of those in each observation, but we do all the components. And there's 16 in 1, 2, and 3. So for an observation, we do the 16 for every observation. And here's a kind of the breakdown. I'm not going to read all those, but there's of the different components. So it goes domain, components, and then an element. So under component 3C, which is again a component engaging students in learning, these are the elements: activities and assignments, grouping students, instructional materials, resources, structure, and pacing. And then here's an example of the rubric. So for activities and assignments, it spells exactly out what those means. And then during the calibration and the evaluator training, we do a lot of work on what does most mean, what are all students, and we work together to calibrate what best practice is with the trainer, the outside trainer, who's nationally recognized as an expert in doing evaluation and observations and providing feedback. So again, some stakeholder feedback, focus groups and teachers, administrators. 2018, it was district-led. That was the project that Steve and I did. 2019, basis policy did some focus groups. Again, we make sure that we're informing GREA presidents and talking to them and talking over decisions. Many of the decisions we made over COVID to adjust was we worked collaboratively with the GREA on what we felt was best during that time. And also UNISERV directors we've gotten feedback from. Some of the things that we've done, talked about the lower weight for early observations. We reduced the number of observations, additional differentiated student growth rubrics. So during COVID in 2021, all teachers got effective student growth. And then we added on-demand Danielson instructional video courses. And there's a lot of other things that we've done too, but these are some of the highlights. Here are the effectiveness results over the years. You'll see some of the, what are some of the changes and the differences in that data. 17-18 was, 18-19 is when the center-based programs went to ISD. So that's why there's a difference in the number of teachers overall that were observed. If you'll notice the trends, proportionally it is fairly steady, especially as we've gotten further along in the years. You look at 1920, that's the year only probationary teachers were taught, so that's why those are evaluated. That's why those were so low. That was a year where they said nobody was going to be evaluated, and then March they said, oh, never mind, probationary are. So it's been quite the journey in the last couple of years through COVID. In 2021, because of COVID, we had no student growth was effective for everyone. 2021, we went back to having student growth attached to teachers. So you can see highly effective was reduced a little bit. Effective, more effectives. Minimally effective went up a little. The minimally effective, we're only still talking about 16 teachers who are less than effective. Most of our teachers are effective or highly effective based on this system. Some of the support, we do IDP training for evaluators. So if I have a teacher who needs to have an IDP to address some performance concerns. There's training throughout the year, at the beginning of the year and throughout the year for evaluators, making sure they're following the process and providing support. We provide mentors for probationary teachers and also for teachers who are tenured who may need additional support. We have the on-demand visiting other classrooms, curriculum supervisors, coach, and our new teacher professional learning. So we're finding most of, at least almost every year, it's about half of our teachers who are in the minimally effective range are in the new to the profession or new in the first couple of years to the district. And we tell at a new teacher orientation, we say really, when you're new at something, you're not going to be as good as you are going to be in your third year and fourth year. So, really minimally effective is almost where we expect some probationary, especially when they're new to the profession, to be at. So there's some implications. GRPS evaluation system improves teacher practice. So I went back to some other data. It's really hard to compare 1920 COVID data to last year's data. So don't want to make any inferences from that. But looking back to previous years, pre-COVID, the evaluation system does show that it improves teacher practice. So, from effective to highly effective, from minimally effective to effective, there's from minimally effective to effective. Some years, I think our lowest year was 48% of the minimally effective improved to effective, but a couple years we were in 65%, 78%. So really effectiveness improves through our system. And again, that when our teacher practice improves, scholar outcomes improve. So we're going to look and also revisit our 2019-20 focus group information. And then we're going to continue stakeholder input, knowing that because of the changes in Lansing, there's probably going to be significant changes in our evaluation process based on some forecasting and maybe some changes in the state law. So I think it's a great opportunity for us. I think it was something that we've been thinking about anyway. It's been a while, though we've gotten stakeholder input to really relook at what we're doing and how we're doing it with voice from stakeholders again to see what changes need to be made. Here are some additional ways we invite you to support our evaluation process. Communicate with stakeholders that we do have a process and refer them to me if they have any additional questions. So we don't get as many questions as we used to be because we've been intentional in providing information. So we have an evaluation guidebook that is developed every year that goes out to everybody and can be accessed. A few years ago, we put together orientation PowerPoint, so we have an evaluation orientation that goes through all of the parts of the evaluation system that's presented in a staff meeting to make sure everybody gets that. And then this year, one of the things that I did was I actually took the PowerPoint and did a voiceover of it, so folks can hear it from me, again, with the idea that would provide more consistency throughout the district. And so that was one reason. The second reason, too, is that it's one thing to look at a guidebook, but it's also another thing to hear it. So it's the recording is accessible at all times. So as a teacher, if I have a question, I can go back to that orientation recording and hear what it said rather than just trying to interpret what the guidebook says, although the guidebook is very detailed. Any questions?
Very thorough. I appreciate the responsiveness because I know we raised these questions earlier. The problem is you have to do it all over again. Because we're going to change, but if the system's going to change, anyway. I think it's especially the data on the percentages of people that get effective and highly effective or minimally effective and ineffective. It helps when we hear complaints about the system. I don't even know if we hear. Did you guys hear anything in the campaign? Usually that's when it came up, is like the campaigns that
Not in
didn't
the
come.
campaign process.
Yeah, there
Yeah, I
was
mean,
some, but
I know in 18, we got a lot of people, and I had a lot of people coming to me, and I haven't heard much lately, but there's been bigger things to be concerned about. So,
I guess the wondering that I'm having that comes to mind right now is when you have those focus groups, what all does that entail? Or do you have like designated questions that you ask?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we have So we have defined questions that we ask to, again, to provide consistency across. And then we always try to ask a question around what else should we know. And again, that would be something that we would make sure we're very intentional in designing and making sure you're writing questions that aren't leading, and then providing different ways for people to share their voice and their what it is for them.
And then, do we have any, I know you spoke to that one implication is that it improves teacher practice. Do we have any evidence of, outside of them growing from minimally effective to effective, that could be because of the evaluation system, but it could be because of other factors. So do we have any data that from the teachers or principals that where we ask that question, like, what do you think has improved your practice
That's a
the
great question.
most?
You're right, yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a question we can ask. And because it goes to, I always, and since I've been in education, one of the most important resources is time, right? And we're so, my mom was a GRPS teacher, I was a teacher. I don't think folks who either don't know somebody who's a teacher know how much just time consuming it is. So we want to focus on those things that are improving scholar outcomes, right? And asking the teachers, what helps you help our scholars improve the most is just a great question. So we'll definitely, I think there's more opportunities other than just around evaluation to ask that question.
And I think some of those things could be what we provide to them in the support slide. Like it could be the mentors, it could be visiting other classrooms. But I just want to make sure we're not saying they grew because of this.
Yeah, I'm not, if I said it that way, I should not say it that way. I mean, we didn't do a research project to say it's causal, but it is, what it shows is that our teachers are growing, and I think this does have, that is a part of it, for many reasons.
Anything else? Okay,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
So good evening once again. This time I brought Steve Petros with me. Steve is the Director of Assessment and Evaluation, and we're both going to talk about the school index report, this update that just came out very recently.
So the school index, and just to kind of frame this, I will kind of start from the balcony or the state perspective, and then Mel can actually share more details at the local district perspective. So to just kind of set the stage, the school index is really the state's accountability system and has been for about the past 5 years or so. The index consists of a handful of different components, some of which apply to the different grade band configurations of our schools, and we can kind of walk through those for a moment and then talk about the different weights that are applied to those. So this is kind of small, but I'm going to kind of focus really more on the different school index components. And pre-COVID, these were the weights associated with all the different categories. Just to kind of talk through them, student growth is the heaviest, just over a third. Proficiency, just below that, and that change was made probably 4 to 5 years ago to give more weight to the growth component. Under school quality, there are several different categories. Combined, they equal 14%, but different schools have different combinations of those categories, so I'll unpack those in a moment. Moving down the list, we've got grad rate at a 10%, English learners, assessment participation with an expectation of 95% plus at a minimum, and then English learner participation. I do want to just kind of add some nuance or caveats to some of these components. Student growth at 34%. One thing that's unique for this year is that student growth is not a category for our K-5 buildings. Due to no state testing in spring of 20, limited state testing in the spring of 21, student growth is actually looking at the 3-year period from the spring of 19 to the spring of 22. In a K-5 building, 5th graders were only in 2nd grade in the spring of 19. And the M-STEP testing begins in grade 3. So as a result, we have no pre and post test. So for all of our K-5 buildings, the student growth component has been removed. That 34% weight allocation has been redistributed to the other categories. In a similar sense, kind of sliding down to grad rate at 10%, for non-high schools, that 10% weight gets reallocated to the other components as well. So this is kind of the baseline or the default, but depending upon the grade configuration of the building and the availability of data, not all components apply at the weights as described or as presented on the screen. One more little nuance, under school quality and student success, of all of those components, if a component does not apply to a school, then that weight gets pulled out. One phenomenon that our schools have experienced, some of our schools only have chronic absenteeism as a component for that school quality component. And as a result, although it says 4% for chronic absenteeism, the reality is it might have ballooned all the way up to the full 14. And with that, I'll pass it over to Mel to talk more about some GRPS specifics.
Yes, so what we're looking at is 3 categories. And so they're ranked kind of with the most severe, I would say, to the least severe. And so comprehensive support and improvement, or CSI, is schools identified in the bottom 5% of Michigan. You can be identified a few different ways. If you're in the bottom 5%, or if you have a high school graduation rate at a 67% or less, or if you were a CSI cohort but did not meet the CSI exit criteria, or you were additional targeted support school but did not exit from the previous years when they named them. The next middle target is additional targeted support, and then you see schools identified for ATS if they have both one or more of the subgroups in the bottom 25%, and one or more subgroups overall performing like a 5%. And that is a 6-year cohort. And then the least restrictive one is the targeted support improvement, or TSI, and TSIs have one or more subgroups in the bottom 25 of each applicable component. And this is annually for that one. We're about to name some of the schools, but I really want to point this out. If I could stress this 10 times, I would do it. I heard what Steve said in the sense that around the weights, and then it was distributed a little bit differently because of COVID and things of that nature. And we know that where our academic percentages is across schools beyond this list is something we have to improve on. And this is what we're working on. And so we're working not just with I'm going to name 14 schools, not just with the 14 schools, but with everyone, in the sense that even this Friday, we have a principals meeting, and we're going through and making sure everyone understands the what behind it, if you're on a list or not, because we know a list doesn't determine what we do. We can determine that without a list. Our executive directors lead this effort on a daily basis with their cohorts, and we adopted formerly the academic team. We call it SWIL now, System-Wide Instructional Leadership Team, led by Dr. Lovelady Mitchell, and we come together to really think through systems as it relates to academics and the whole child. And so that's something that we meet on a weekly basis, and I think we're gaining a lot of traction around that effort. We know we've been talking around these instructional best practices around these, and it identifies with all the schools around these. We talk around like 7 instructional best practices that ranges from like culturally informed instruction, standards aligned targets, scholar artifacts, things of that nature that we really drawing attention on and honing on. It doesn't matter if you're on a list or not. These are best practices that we're trying to get into our system. And also, we also know that we were awarded a wonderful Promise Neighborhood grant on the southeast side that supports a lot of this work as well. So I want to stress that as we begin to look at the schools, we're going to talk about them, but I want to say the work we're doing is for the whole system. And so remember, it kind of goes from the most restrictive to the least restrictive. The CSI, or the Comprehensive Support and Improvement Schools, we have 3, Campus, Elementary, Alger, and Ottawa High School. Alger Middle School was on the previous list before, and so they've been on it for 2 consecutive cycles with that. And remember, the reason why they're on the list was the overall index in the bottom 5%. Ottawa's on there is because their grad rate for the 21-22 school year was below 67%. It has went up, or projected to go up since then, but for that one cohort, they dipped below that threshold. And then Alger was on the list before as well.
I'm sorry, are these feeder schools to Ottawa?
Yep, yep, they are. And so, full transparency, Campus and Alger feed into Ottawa.
Yeah.
And so that is a concern that we're looking at. The next list is, remember, the middle list, and this is a list, you're on it for 6 years. It is additional targeted and support, and you see the reasons why you got on the list, but we have Harrison Park, Aberdeen, Burton Middle, Riverside, C.A. Frost Middle High, Martin Luther King Leadership Academy, and Dickinson Academy. And with this list, it was for subgroup reasons, and it ranges from the reasons why for each one. But what we're beginning to address the schools that were on the list and not on the list regarding the subgroups, because they may have had an overall score that was a cut score that was high enough, but it was a particular subgroup or subgroups that got them on this list. And then the last list is the least restrictive, a TSI, or Targeted Support and Improvement. You see there are 4 schools, Sibley Elementary, Gerald Ford Academic Center, North Park Montessori, and Westwood Middle School on this list. And again, there was a subgroup that was identified as an area of need. And so kind of next steps, what happens? And so we were named end of really November, and so it was really relatively the last couple of weeks. This came out. We will have, the state hasn't defined the date yet, but once they do, we have X amount of days to submit a plan. And so the plan typically is going to address like the ABCs, attendance, behavior, and course performance. It's going to be something around that. But there will be a partnership with the local ISD and Michigan Department of Education to supporting us in writing these plans. And then we're going to have biweekly meetings with those 2 role groups. And then we have targets. We're going to have 18-month benchmark targets and 36-month benchmark targets. And then we have to bring this information back to this committee semi-annually to answer questions and get feedback and things of that nature. And so that's kind of what to expect. We don't have a date yet, but we're expecting a date fairly soon and when the plan is due. And then we will, we're in the beginning stages of now really revising the comprehensive needs assessment at the building level. So really looking, because you got to do that annually anyway, but you're really looking at why things the way they are. And so that's really, I think, one of the immediate next steps after understanding why you got on the list with that. Then saying that, I've already mentioned kind of next steps. What we can do is, we're collaborating semi-annually like we're doing now. We might have some school principals with us next time to really talk about what's happening at the building level. We could talk about what happens at the district level. And then we know the strategic plan increasing math and reading is really what it is and what we have to do, regardless if you're on the list or not. And then one thing that we're doing, we have a great start at, is starting early. We know we have an early literacy team, and then they mentioned, I know a couple meetings ago they talked around, Roseanne and Jonathan and this team talked around 100 elementary teachers across the district, focusing on reading and early literacy best practices. And so that's just the beginning. But I think that's a wonderful beginning to begin to focus on literacy. And so, in saying that, I know we went pretty fast with that, but we will take questions.
No, thanks. I'm glad that the Southeast Side Schools, that fits in with this new initiative that, is going to target them. So it's, because those are obviously consistently either on the these lists or are near these lists, so.
So were you saying that we don't know exactly why they got on the list?
No,
or-
so we know, and so remember, it ranged from, it's really, you have the comprehensive support and improvement, and they were identified as one of the lowest 5% schools in the state. In Ottawa's particular case, in the 21-22, for that, the 21, I'm sorry, the 2021 cohort, or graduating cohort, was below 67%. And so that's why those, but the other two schools, campus and the Alger, were identified because they were, their scores identified them to be one of the lowest 5%. The other schools, it was on subgroups, and it ranged from subgroups from special education. It could be African American, Hispanic. It was a range of subgroups. The reasons why they got on the subgroups around the middle 8 schools, and the same thing for the last cohort.
And as a reminder, for campuses, a K-5 building, there's no student growth in their school index. So as a result, the proficiency bucket doubled. And so proficiency had at least half, up to 64% of the overall weight was from proficiency.
Yeah, I mean, where we're at right now, I think the questions are going to come as the plan develops.
Yep.
And
So we'll make sure, I know, we definitely will collaborate and bring the plan back, but it's just so new. It's literally been, probably 2 weeks since this list came out.
I just remember hearing
And so
about it.
we're still trying to unpack the data, so schools can work with their instructional leadership teams and things of that nature, and get communication out to families. That's kind of the next steps that we're doing as well.
thank you.
So, as you heard, we have things that we have identified that we need to continue to work on and deepen, and clarifying our core instruction, and then identifying the support and interventions that help us meet our goal, and building capacity, continuing to build capacity in our leaders, instructional leaders, are some of the things that are in our front view. In terms of additional steps, we know that we want to come back and bring the plans back. We also want to highlight some of the things that are happening at Ottawa related to the music program. Earlier, Mel mentioned the early literacy cohort. We want to unpack a couple other initiatives around building literacy. So that's early L, but we have some things for middle school and high school relative to advisory groups that will clarify the core instruction, as well as ELA fellows. So having resident experts at the high school level. The last thing that I want to just highlight is that we've really been grappling with this idea of, based on our data and based on systems wide or broadly, sometimes marginalizing our scholars, we want to be very deliberate about how we staff. Using, for example, maybe the medical model in terms of thinking outside of the box about how we allocate resources, how we go about making sure who's in the room, and because we're in the great resignation, making sure we have a plan B when we don't have enough bodies in the room, but coming up with other ways to ensure that our scholars are getting access to top-tier core instruction. So those are some of the things that the next group will hear about in 2023. What questions might you have for me, and or what might you want to make sure makes that list for 2023?
I think that the committee should memorize all 76 elements of the Danielson rubric. And present them to the.
You'll come back for that part, huh?
I'll be out there. So.
Yeah, I would hope that, what we just heard about is going to drive a lot of the work that we do in this committee, and if I'm on the committee again, and I think our strategic plan is going to drive, really they'll partner together, so.
And I'm thinking about the last two elections yours in 20, right? And then also in 18, there hasn't been much board turnover. You guys had no turnover. Mine, I think, just had one. No, we actually did. It brought you and Kim on. So
Yeah.
anyway, it'll be yeah, it'll be a lot of work. So.
Yeah, I do think the onboarding process that we're scheduling will assist in some of the transition. What won't change is there is clarity around the priority on centering teaching and learning and moving the needle for scholars and staff. That won't change. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you got the strategic plan with all the metrics and stuff.
We have a good guide.
And the theory of action. Yep, agreed. So thank you again for your years of service,
Yes,
and we
thank
know
you.
we'll
Yeah.
continue to see you. Yeah, and happy holidays.
Feel free to come back to any academic
Yeah,
meeting.
I, you know, I'm on the board, so I can do PowerPoint presentations in the Academic Achievement Committee.
Yeah.
So that has certainly been the longest portions of meetings. So, but it's always helpful. Yeah, and the other thing is that, I mean, I was just thinking about this with all that evaluation information is that, you know, the committee is the only one that has it now, and and it ends
Yeah.
up being so important. So, how do you do it for everybody? But that'll be the next group's question. So,
Yeah. Well,
well, thanks.
Yeah, some of, I
everybody.
mean, some of these topics deserve whole board,
yeah.
you know. I'm just thinking as I make my notes for even just sharing with the board
Yeah.
what happens at our meeting. I mean, a lot of these things are,
Yeah, so we've grappled with that too, and what we know for sure is it's right to start here.
yeah.
And then if you all see it fit to invite us to go whole board, then we certainly can do that, and we can certainly scale back some. So it's a high level, and a shorter, more condensed amount of time, but let us know.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, thank you.
thank you.
I will adjourn this meeting.
Okay, thank you again.